sarcastic लगेगा फिर वो वाला आगे भेज देता हूँ अपना एक्सप्लेन करूँगा sarcastic नहीं था.
Hello, everyone. As you come in, if you wouldn't mind putting yourselves on mute, please, we would greatly appreciate it. And right now, we will go ahead and get started. As it is now 2:02, in the interest of time, we have a nice session planned out for you all. So everyone, this is our session 3. Next slide, please, Eureka. This is our session 3 of our PRAPARE Tiger team for the 2023 year. Today, we will be speaking about empathic inquiry and collecting PRAPARE data. In terms of the session overview, today we will be providing a high level of an overview of empathic inquiry and how to use empathic inquiry to collect data. And then we will open up the floor for a Q&A discussion. Next slide, please. So this is our PRAPARE Tiger team facilitator team. You will be hearing from me, Chloe Destinoble, as well as Eureka De La Cruz. And in the chat, we have Nalani, who will be providing some tech support for us. Next slide, please. So while this presentation is being led by NACC, I'd like to point out that PRAPARE was created in collaboration between NACC, AppShow, and OPCA. Next slide, please. In terms of our learning objectives for today, for one, we will aim to understand the importance of empathic inquiry approaches to collecting PRAPARE data, learn how to create an empathic conversation around SDOH screening, and finally, learn data collection techniques using empathic inquiry. So right now, we would like to get a sense of who's in the room, and we also want to go ahead and get started with some questions. So we want, if you all can scan the QR code currently on your screen, it will take you directly to some of our Menti questions. We want to start off by introducing yourselves, your name, your role in your organization, and then after that, it will prompt you to answer 2 questions. Will kind of help us set the stage for our discussion today. So go ahead and introduce yourselves, please. Thank you. We'd like to welcome you all. Welcome, Hannah. Welcome, Nicole. Welcome, Rebecca. Thank you all for joining us today. Please continue dropping those answers in. We would love to hear from you all. And if you're having any issues with Mentimeter, please feel free to drop that in the chat as well, introducing yourselves to us. And I think now we can move on to our next question. Eureka, we want to know in terms of how do you build rapport and trust with the patients that you see?
Now we know some of you have been doing this work for a while, so we'd love to hear from you all. Okay, I'm seeing some answers trickle in.
Awesome. So as the answers are coming in, we're seeing listening to understand. Perfect. That's part of what we will be discussing today. We see shared lived experiences, positive attitude. Sorry about that. Language accessibility, perfect. Patient engagement, being honest and follow through with what you say, absolutely. Meet them where they are at, of course. trauma-informed care, same language, obtain trust, connection, regular follow-up, excuse me. And just like Yuriko said, you all are already doing this work. So to share this with us, we greatly appreciate it. We see being warm and open in conversation with them, absolutely setting that conversation. So being warm in your tone is definitely important. Listening and try to answer questions, absolutely. Listen. Perfect. And follow through. We're seeing a couple of follow throughs. Okay, thank you all for participating in that one. And I think now we can move on to the next question, Yuriko. So now you all discussed some of the things that you all are doing. Now we want to hear about some of the challenges that you all are having with actually building the rapport or trust. Language, absolutely. Provider turnover, time, rebuilding what others have broken, earning trust. Patient attitude, negative, cultural differences. We hear a lot about that. Limited resources, which is usually a big one. Patient history with people not sticking around to help them, absolutely. ICE immigration. And the person who stated ICE immigration, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute to sharing with us a little bit about that one.
Hi, this is Linda Carmona Sanchez. I happen to put in ICE immigration, and the reason that I think it's a challenge for building rapport or trust is that many of our consumers are afraid to answer anything because of possible implications for immigration and possible effect to their immigration status as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming off mute and sharing with us, Linda. Okay, thank you all for sharing. I think now we're going to go over and switch back to our presentation and then to keep us moving. Thank you so much, Yuriko, for that. And now we want to get started with our presentation. In terms of when you think about PRAPARE, you wanted to think it all as a conversation starter. This part of the session will focus on the art of using PRAPARE to screen for SDOH needs. Something we've heard from PRAPARE pioneers and many users is that it's good to think about PRAPARE as a conversation starter. Taking this approach allows us to use PRAPARE as a tool to build relationships with patients versus just reading it off as a kind of like a questionnaire that you are going through. I will provide a high-level overview of motivational interviewing and empathic inquiry. Next slide, please. So by now, we've mentioned empathic inquiry so many times before this session even actually started. So I want to get into the actual definition of it. In terms of empathic inquiry, it's the act of asking for information with the intent of understanding the patient's experiences, concerns, and perspectives, combined with capacity to compassionately communicate this understanding for the purpose of creating human connection between patients and professionals. Next slide, please. So when we think about the foundation of the PRAPARE administration, it is also important to not forget about the patients in this process. There are several ways to go about engaging with patients. So for one, gather feedback on how you introduce yourself to patients. 2, ask patients to participate in the PRAPARE huddles. 3, engage patients in enhancing the community resource guide. 4, visit organizations, patients, and partners in the community, and as well as engage patients in community advocacy for change. So next slide, please. So we want to get into some empathic inquiry approaches. So for one, we want to support autonomy and respect privacy. We want to provide a clear explanation for conducting the screening, how information will be used, and options to follow up. So this is important to what Linda shared. Some people may be hesitating with sharing such information about them because they're not sure of how the information will be used. So it's important for you to share that and provide a clear explanation of this. So that way you don't want to run into patients not sharing because of concerns such as ICE. And 3, you want to share power by asking about patients' their priorities. 4, account for the stigma associated with experiencing social needs, as well as personal assumptions about the experiences and capacities of patients. And 5, ask about strengths, interests, and assets. Next slide, please. To continue with some of our empathic inquiry approaches, we have 6 test screening workflows with patients before standardizing approach. 7, ensure that information disclosed by patients through social drivers of health screening is shared with and acknowledged by all members of the care team. This is to continue with that follow through some of these challenges that you all mentioned previously. So we want to make sure that the information disclosed by the patients through this is actually shared with the care team. So that way there's a proper follow-up for some of these issues, as well as 8, select a care team member with sufficient time to connect with patients about social drivers of health needs. And 9, minimize patients and staff distress and trauma. Next slide, please. So we want to provide some patient-centered SDOH screening conversation tips. So for one, engaging, start with relationships. You want to introduce yourself, state your role, how you support patients with health and well-being, and how long you've been with the organization. This is all part of building that relationship. And of course, let the patient know how they can ask their question at any time. Next slide, please. And next, we want to explain the what, why, and how long of the screening process. A way that we can do that is we are having these conversations with patients so that we can understand better what might be affecting your health and well-being. We may be able to help you get connected to resources, though we can't guarantee that will be the case, even where we can't connect you to assistance. This information will help us partner with you to create a care plan that fits your life. Understanding what the patients are experiencing, that we serve are experiencing, also helps us to better advocate for our community. So we ran a lot into, I did a lot of SDOH screening throughout the pandemic, and some of the things that we thought was helpful is actually letting people know through these conversations that this is going to take about 10 minutes. Then people are more likely to engage. So that was just an example of how you may go about doing so. Next slide, please. So to continue with starting of the relationship, we want to ask permission to have conversation. Acknowledge the potential sensitivity of some questions. And a way that we can go about that is that it is okay if we spend a few minutes talking about your experiences and priorities in your life outside the clinic that may be affecting your health. That would be a question that we would go about that. And as well as, I want to acknowledge that some of the questions might feel kind of sensitive, so please feel free to let me know at any time you don't want to answer any of these questions. So give permission to decline at any point. It's important to let patients know that they can do that. So now, next slide, please. So a summary of how to start with the relationship. You want to introduce yourself based on the examples that we previously gave. You want to introduce yourselves, ask patient questions, explain why, what, and how long, ask permission, and allow patients to decline. So now I will pass the mic to my colleague Eureka, who will be taking us through the next portion.
Great. Thanks so much, Chloe. I appreciate you providing that great overview. What's really important, and a lot of the great reasons that you all shared in terms of how you build trust and some of the challenges in terms of building trust, you know, it's really, hopefully you'll be able to gain some ideas from this presentation. So just wanted to thank Chloe for that phenomenal foundation and opening for us. So when it comes to really thinking about how do we convey understanding for our patients and how do we really create this understanding, these are just some tips to really allow us to empathize and really, you know, in a way, embody what empathizing looks like. So the first one is briefly summarizing the results of the screening, asking the patient an open-ended question about their priorities. And this is important because it shows that you're paying attention, right? You want to show that you've taken the time to look at their responses. Maybe someone else completed the screening, maybe it's electronically. So it's always good to just go through and say, hey, I was able to see your responses and I'm seeing you're having difficulties with home insecurity, housing, food insecurity, or transportation. Which of these priorities are really more important to you? And just kind of go from there. The other one would be to ask open-ended questions to find out the patient's experiences with their needs or with any resources. And so these are just some examples to have in the back pocket, if you will. Tell me about your typical experience. What concerns do you have about getting the resources you need? Sometimes asking this may actually uncover some of the previous traumas they've experienced with other resources or in other systems they've navigated. So just asking them about their previous experience can be really powerful. Another question could be, we've talked about some of the things that might be challenging to your health. I'd like to hear more about things that you enjoy. What are your hobbies? What do you find most meaningful in your life? You want to be able to balance some of these conversations so it isn't always so deficit based. I mean, one of the things that I love about PRAPARE is that we have assets in there, right? So this is a great way to kind of unearth some of those assets or just some of the things that are going well in your patients' lives. Another way to convey understanding is to really think about your nonverbal listening cues. And that someone said it earlier in terms of eye contact and body language. That's something that can be really important. And this is a tricky one to navigate. Sometimes there may be cultural differences. Something that I've learned from previous colleagues is that it's always good to mirror what patients are doing in front of you and just kind of read the room and read how they're engaging with you. We always want to be mindful and respectful of that. So just being as mindful of that and really kind of seeing what they're doing and then kind of mirroring that back to them. And then the other thing is to convey understanding through reflective listening. This usually requires a little bit more practice, but once you start doing, you start getting a little bit more proficient in it. So one way to really convey reflective listening is to hear, as you've heard everything that the patient has shared with you, just kind of summarizing, but also reflecting back what you've heard. And some things may be word for word, but sometimes you may just quickly summarize what you've gathered from that. And this is separate from the summarizing of the results from PRAPARE, if you will, but really just listening and really being able to see, okay, I've seen that you've had a lot of different challenges that you're navigating. This is really stressful for you. Is that correct? And kind of really being able to have that reflection back to them. Or even just seeing in their conversation, many times how much someone mentions something really tells you what their highest priority is. So maybe reflecting that back to them. So these are just some of the ways to convey and create and convey understanding. So it's kind of like a push-pull, if you will. So if you think about the push-pull, one of the things that we're pushing out to our patients could be done through summarizing the results of the screening, being mindful of our nonverbal listening cues. So what are we reflecting back to our patients? And then also that reflective listening that we're doing. The pulling, if you will, is asking those open-ended questions, really paying attention and really seeing how much more you can uncover in your conversations with patients as they're in front of you, or as you've been able to work with them. Sometimes we're doing this through telehealth or phone calls, so I have to be mindful of that as well. So these are just summarizing just this particular step of empathizing and creating and conveying understanding with our patients. So the next part here, we'll be talking about supporting and really focusing on strengths. And we're really intentional in choosing this graphic here. I don't know if you're able to see it, but there is a small chess piece. And then in the reflection, it's a different part of the chess piece. I think it's the king. I don't play chess. I don't know why I chose it, but anyway. The reason we chose this was because many times we have patients that come in and they've navigated many different experiences, and sometimes how they see themselves is in a negative way. They don't understand, or they haven't seen or appreciated their strengths, right? And so one of the things that I learned from a counselor way back when was when she said, you know, we have an opportunity as we work with patients to reflect back to them some things that they've never seen. So really being that mirror for our patients. Sometimes they always see the negative, they hear the negative. They're living in some really challenging situations. So if this is an opportunity for us to really focus on their strengths, we can be that mirror back for our patients. And some of this can happen through providing affirmations of our patient's strengths and resilience. And then also using empathy-based affirmations. And this is really important, that you have to be specific with a characteristic or behavior, since this could be most powerful. Patients, they've seen and heard it all. They've interacted with different people, so they can tell when you're being authentic and specific. Really helps to see that you're paying attention, right? And so some examples of using empathy-based affirmations will be, it sounds like you've been working hard to make ends meet. You are clearly very resourceful and creative, right? So as you hear and see from patients what they've done to navigate their current situation, pointing out some of the strengths. And sometimes it's maybe the first time that they're hearing something is a strength. So that's something that with our patients and the clients that we work with, we have to be mindful of that. Another example could be, it takes a lot of strength to get through such a tough situation. You really have a lot of grit. And just being able to have some of those affirmations in your back pocket could be really helpful. So this is where I would really encourage you all to team up with teammates or colleagues at your health center or your practice, and just practice some of these things with each other so that you get a little bit more familiar with it and you feel more comfortable with it. So when it comes to another step within patient-centered SUA screening conversation tips, this is probably one of the most important parts as you're building the relationship with patients and clients. The act of summarizing and action planning is really powerful. So you want to end with empathy and collaboration, and this really allows us to really make sure that we're in agreement with our patients in terms of the priorities and the next steps after the conversation's been had, and really being able, again, to demonstrate empathy and supportive collaboration. You want to summarize key points from the conversation to demonstrate that understanding. This may seem really repetitive, but it's just really important in terms of being able to build that relationship. And this is a wonderful tactic, because if you've missed anything, or maybe you didn't miss anything, but maybe the patient's going to tell you, actually, this is a priority. And that's powerful. That allows our patients to be autonomous, to be engaged, and to really have that driver's seat, if you will. And then using open-ended questions to find out whether the patient wants referrals. So really being able to understand, what is the most important to them, what resources they've already tapped into, and really being able to see what is the most available or appropriate resources for them. So on the next slide here, kind of continuing this summarizing and action planning step with building rapport and trust with our patients. And this is a common one where we hear that, oh my goodness, what happens if we're doing the PRAPARE screening, we don't have no resources available. That is okay. You can acknowledge that. And I was thinking about it earlier. Many of our patients probably know that there's no resources, so they know this. Sometimes they may not be aware of the resources, but sometimes they really have an understanding that there's just really there's limited resources in the community. So it's okay to say that. And it's okay to acknowledge that you're not going to be able to solve all the world's problems in one day, but that with the information that they've provided you as a health center or as an organization, you're collecting everything that you need to be able to support their care planning. Again, screening is not transactional, it's about building relationship. But as much as possible, if you're able to use that information to extend outside the walls of the health center, that's something that you could also address. But again, be mindful of what your capacity is at your organization. And then finally, ask the patient permission to follow up. And this is powerful in terms of, again, allowing patients to direct their care. And this is something that may be new to patients. Many times they're not involved in their own care planning, or this may be new for them. So allow them to provide ask them for permission. That's very powerful. And that's an example of sharing power with patients. So you're not the one that's, holding all the power. But these are just some examples of how to do this. So we've talked about a few different challenges you've been experiencing today: trouble paying your rent, having enough food by the end of the month, as well as feeling kind of lonely or isolated. It sounds like getting access to food is really important to you. Is that correct? They may or may not agree with you. So again, this is an opportunity for them to tell you what's important to them. And then you could also ask about what they already know about resources in your community, and just kind of working from there with them. So these are just some examples in terms of summarizing and action planning and, being on the same page with your patients. And then many times we will have to collaborate with our teams at our health centers or organizations. And that is part of SDOH screening, right? That is part of after the patient has completed the screening and you've had that conversation with the patient, you will be collaborating with the team. So kind of having that warm handoff with the team that you work with, in terms of any priorities that came top of mind, being able to do really impactful care coordination and really making sure that there's a seamless team approach for care. As much as possible, initiate the internal referral process, or even external. We know that some of you partner externally as well, but always inform the patient of the warm handoff. Let them know, as if you know people's names that that you'll be referring them to, is really powerful. And that's something that I've seen work really well in many different organizations in my previous work experiences. Having that name and being able to say, yes, I've worked with Chloe in the past, she's done X, Y, and Z. I'm going to connect you with her. She'll be able to help you with X, Y, Z. And that is something that can be really powerful for them. So we, at this point, we're going to kind of see this all come together. We're going to actually take a moment to view this great example, this recording from our colleagues at the Oregon Primary Care Association. They recorded this a while ago. So I'm going to go ahead and see where I can. All right. It's always fun trying to manage all these different things. So right now we're going to go ahead and see this video, and I'll hopefully, if you can't hear anything, let me know, and hopefully you can hear it.
We're good, Yuriko.
Hi, I'm Ariel Singer, and I'm the Innovations Director at the Oregon Primary Care Association. We put together a short video to demonstrate Empathic Inquiry. Empathic Inquiry is a motivational interviewing and trauma-informed care-based approach to social determinants of health interviewing. The goal of Empathic Inquiry is to make the interviewing process feel less like data collection and more like an opportunity to connect with patients, to hear their stories, and to really listen to their life experience. So what you'll see in the video is that we'll start with an introduction and explain why we're doing the interview and set expectations for how long it will take. We'll then move on to providing a warning to patients that there might be some sensitive topics in the interview and they can decline to participate at any point. We'll then demonstrate a few questions from the PRAPARE Social Determinants of Health interviewing tool, and I'll incorporate reflective listening and affirmations, which are from the motivational interviewing approach to working with patients. We'll end by asking about the patient's priorities and arranging follow-up. Thanks for watching. Hi, Charles. My name is Ariel.
Hey, Ariel.
I'm a community health worker here at the clinic.
Nice.
Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
So we're expanding the way that we work with our patients and trying to partner with you to understand more about your life and explore the ways that we can support your health and well-being more fully.
Nice.
Yeah, so part of doing that is finding out more about your experiences, and I'm hoping to spend some time with you today asking some questions
Okay.
about what's going on in your life outside the clinic, and I was wondering if that would be okay with you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. So it'll take about 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. So thanks for agreeing to participate in the process, and I just want to let you know that some of the questions that I'm going to ask you might be on sensitive topics.
Okay.
And if at any point you feel like you don't want to answer one of the questions or you want to stop us, please feel free to do so.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get started. So the first question that I wanted to ask is how hard you find it to pay for the very basics in your life, like food, housing, heating, medical care, and medications. Would you say that paying for those things is not hard at all, somewhat hard, or very hard?
I'd say somewhat hard.
Okay. So if we could go through some specifics, I'd like to do that. So let's start with food. Is that hard to pay for?
Has been lately. My wife was pregnant and we just gave birth to our baby girl.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And due to the pregnancy, she's been wanting to eat more, and we're also trying to eat healthier. So that's been a challenge to afford those foods day in, day out. I work for a restaurant, so I wash dishes at a local restaurant, and at times they, give us food to bring home, which is nice. I'll say it's not on the healthy side, if you know what I mean.
Okay, so we'll say yes to that one. It sounds like health is really important for your family at this
It is now. It's something about a pregnancy and having a newborn in the house is just making us more self-conscious about those things.
Changing your perspective.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Okay. How about utilities?
Some months it's hard, but it's fine for now.
Okay. And how about transportation?
Tough lately. My car broke down last week, which has made it difficult to get to work on time. So I've been taking the bus in the meantime, and I'm just waiting, saving up funds to get that repair done.
Okay. So how about medicine or medical care?
That's covered.
Okay, great. Health insurance?
Again, covered. We have OHP.
Okay, terrific. Clothing?
Clothing has been a challenge lately. Maternity clothes ain't cheap. And the baby's, growing pretty quickly, and she's demanding new types of wardrobe so often, and that's not been easy. Unexpected for sure.
Yeah, so some new expenses there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, how about rent or mortgage payment?
That's not too bad. We live with my mom, and so that's helping out a lot in that department, I'll say.
Great. And how about childcare?
Well, mom's a grandma now, so she is able to help take care of our little one.
Okay, so that sounds like it's not a problem either.
No.
Okay. And how about phone?
Oh man, that phone bill. Something I take care of, and it's another stress financially.
Yeah. Okay. So say yes to phone. Is there anything else that we haven't mentioned?
Between you and me, I would like my wife to work again. But no, child labor ain't easy, and then there's this whole breastfeeding process, which is another layer of stress, I'll say. But hopefully she will have the energy to go back to work. That would help pay for a lot of this stuff.
Okay.
Just help.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question that I'd like to ask you is related to relationships.
Okay.
How often do you feel lonely or isolated from those around you? Never, rarely, sometimes, often, or always?
Well, I see him every day. Isn't that okay?
Well, the question is more about not just that you see people, but that you feel connected with them, that you get emotional support if things are either tough or if you have something good you want to celebrate together?
Oh yeah, well, try to remain positive, but there are days where I just need to be alone,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes feel a little disconnected from those around me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I can say, yeah, sometimes I feel that way.
Okay. So you've got people around, but you don't always feel that connected to them.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Okay. So how about stress? During the past month, how much stress would you say you experienced? A lot of stress, moderate amount of stress, relatively little stress, or almost no stress at all?
Well, now that you've got me reflecting on it all, it's been pretty stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, quite a lot this month. The delivery of a newborn and added expenses, car breaking down, work hours not being stable. Life is stressful.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of different things going on at once.
Tell me about it.
Well, it must take a lot of strength from you to keep powering through all that.
I do what I do, or what I can do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like your family is really important to you and you want to do everything you can for them.
Yeah, you know, that's my job.
Yeah. Well, of the things we've talked about today, it sounds like there's some things that you feel like are pretty solid, like your housing situation, baby's able to stay with grandma, those feel good for you. And then there's some things that are a little bit more of a strain. There's the groceries piece and transportation, phone bill, some financial stressors. And it sounds like you also just are kind of feeling a little worn down by the stress of it all.
That's true.
I'm wondering of those things whether there's anything that stands out to you as a priority. Like if you were going to focus on one thing to try to improve your health, your well-being, how things are going in your life, what do you think it would be?
You know, we're really happy when we have the nice food on the table, and you know, mom's eating well. I'm able to help cook it, and it'd be really good to have more money to buy some of the foods we prefer or are starting to like. That would help a lot. I noticed everyone's happier all around that way. And maybe cut down on that beautiful greasy slice of pizza. Yeah.
Okay, so being sure you're able to get healthy food sounds like your number one.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely something that we can partner with you here at the clinic. Is that something you'd like to work with us on?
Great.
Okay, so let's find a time to see what we can do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Loving it.
Thanks for your time today, Charles.
Yeah, thank you, Ariel.
All right, so just that was a brief example of from our colleagues at OPCA. I know they're doing some other work as well, but just wanted to share that example of an empathic inquiry approach being used in real time. So right now I'm actually going to take us to the chat, not to the chat, to the Mentimeter. So if you can go back to Mentimeter, you can go to menti.com and use the code 88140608. So we'd love to hear from you all. What were some empathic inquiry approaches that you observed in the video? So we'll have two polls in this part right here. So we've got affirmations, active listening, repeating to understand, absolutely, reflections, yep. Some other examples that you all saw. Reflective listening, summarizing. What else? Conversation style, active listening, yep. Open-ended questions, good, good, good. There's another, it's funny, when I watch these, I always find something new. All right, there we go. We got some other one. Asking about priorities, what's most important, creating a safe space, patient consent, restating what sounded important to him. Absolutely. Great. Summarizing. What else did you all see in here? Great. I think that pretty much covered everything there. So we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. And I'd love to hear from you all. What would you do differently or say differently? Knowing that you've all been doing screening for a while, we'd love to hear some examples of maybe what you would have done or said differently. There's no right or wrong. When we used to do role plays in different trainings, there's different directions you can go when you do these types of screenings. So we'd love to hear if there's anything that you would have done or said differently in the video. Again, no right or wrong answer, but just love to hear. Give it about 15 more seconds in case. Okay, if there's more time, seeking more info via open-ended questions. Yeah, good example. Ooh, you would have followed up on the statement, I would like my wife to work. Okay, great, that's a good one. I would ask more specific questions about any resources already being used or tried. Great, those are great suggestions. Awesome, good, there's about another 5 or 10 more seconds. But yeah, those are really great examples that you've all shared. And obviously when you do these recordings, you're always trying to be concise, but yeah, these are the different ways you could have navigated the conversation. So thank you for sharing that. Great, so I'll go ahead and take us back to the PowerPoint. All right, so we've already done that. We've already done the Menti polls. So really here, just gonna talk a little bit about kind of the why. So we've talked a lot about the different strategies and just wanted to provide a bit of a rationale for using an empathic inquiry. So Wei provided it earlier. I'm kind of summarizing some of the stuff right now, but just wanted to share with all of you, if you didn't know, that this PRAPARE was reviewed by a health literacy expert for to assess to see what grade reading level this was at, and they found that this was at a 4th to 5th grade reading level. However, we know PRAPARE contains very sensitive questions, and in some cases, these questions do feel intrusive, and in other cases, some of these questions can open us to being, to thinking that we might be judged. So when we think about these questions, these are very sensitive questions that can be uncomfortable for the person asking the question, as well as for the person responding to the questions. And so when answering questions on sensitive topics, people sometimes edit their answers to hide things, to avoid about talking issues in front of other people, or to provide what they believe to be more socially acceptable answers. And as someone pointed out earlier, there's also this, we know that some of the questions that we're asking, they do deal with immigration status, or they may hint at a person's immigration status, or maybe previous involvement with the justice system. So with all of this in mind, really there's a definition for this, and this is known as a social desirability bias. And so to avoid this and gather more accurate data, it is important to build a culture around sensitivity and respect. And the purpose of empathic inquiry approach is to authentically connect with patients to understand their needs and priorities by building trust between the patient and the care team. And this will ensure that all individuals are treated with respect and feel that they can speak honestly in a welcoming and open environment. It also builds trust between patients and providers and leads to the provision of more appropriate care and treatment plans. And what's really important is that when you're using an empathic inquiry approach, the mindset changes from collecting data to getting to know your patient population, one person at a time. And this one person at a time approach really allows us to enhance both the patient and staff well-being. We can't know everything about everyone in every group. So this approach is really important for us to really just get to know the person in front of us or that we're interacting with. So again, all the techniques and strategies that Chloe and I reviewed today are examples of how to infuse empathic inquiry when screening patients using PRAPARE. So empathy and using empathic inquiry is really an evidence-based practice. And there was 2 findings from a literature search on empathic inquiry. And there was, in a review of 25 randomized trials, there was one that stated that one relatively consistent finding is that physicians who adopt a warm, friendly, and reassuring manner are more effective than those who keep consultations formal and do not offer reassurance. So again, this is something that's not just happenstance or just people's opinions. This has been studied. People have done trials and really studied an empathic inquiry approach, and this is what the evidence is saying. there's another finding that that was gathered in the literature search, was that a retrospective analysis of psychiatrists treating patients with depression reported that practitioners who created a bond had better results in treating depression with a placebo rather than psychiatrists who use an active drug but did not form a bond. Really what that says is the warm disposition, being personable, being really empathic with our patients has such a powerful impact that even those that were on medication, it was, you know, that empathic inquiry approach really did something that medicine couldn't, right? And if we think about how we've been navigating, you know, our social interactions with others as a result of the pandemic, you know, this is really even more important. And so on this slide right now, these are just findings from a survey that Oregon Primary Care Association did with about 132 patients on their experience being screened by staff trained in empathic inquiry to complete PRAPARE. And really what this slide tells us is that although these questions may be uncomfortable, patients found value in it. They felt seen, they felt heard, and it's something that they welcomed. So just definitely encourage you all to take a look at the exact findings from this this survey conducted by OPCA. Really powerful here to just read and see these findings from that. And hopefully it's assuring for all of you as well. So with that, kind of not pivoting, but really, you know, knowing that we serve a multitude of patient populations, one of the questions that we get asked is, okay, how do we meet patients where they're at? How do we talk with patients that are from different backgrounds or different lived experiences? And really just want to highlight that, you know, using an empathic inquiry approach really allows each of us to connect with patients from different walks of life in a very humanistic way. And since the empathic inquiry approach allows us to get to know one patient one at a time, we can use this approach to support patients who may have a different lived experience than us. And so, like I said earlier, there's a lot of different populations that we work with. These are some of the HRSA-defined populations that they've identified. And it's really hard to wrap our head and to know everything about each of these populations. You know, how do we balance that with knowing as much as we can about these populations? But really, at the end of the day, we have to really focus on the people or the persons in front of us, right? So using an empathic inquiry approach really allows us to kind of stay connected, stay present, and allows us to really connect with people from all walks of life. And it's something that can help us overcome some of these challenges where we might feel like a fish out of water, if you will. So we know that health centers see a multitude of different types of populations at your health centers. So these are just some of the populations that we know you all serve. Now, just wanted to provide just these very high-level screening considerations, and Chloe will go a little bit more into detail in terms of where these resources or these considerations came from. But some of these actually get back to some of the questions or the challenges that you all raised earlier. So again, just really, you can never emphasize the why of doing a PRAPARE or social needs screening, and taking that humanistic approach and kind of making that come to life with doing a crosswalk to see what other questions or screenings are being done in your health center to see how you can leverage that information and really be able to leverage that to your advantage. The third consideration is something that we heard from the field in terms of, you know, it's always helpful to work with patients and to have a conversation with them in the language that they understand. And one person actually shared that being able to talk about this during the vitals, during the intake and vitals, you know, the visit, that really helped them to build relationship, and they were able to more easily ask the social needs screening questions. So just wanted to highlight that. And then here we also have that just remembering again that patients, you know, they're navigating so many different systems. And so we can't put them in that box, if you will. So as much as we can, we have to think about what systems they're navigating and try to be as humanistic as possible. Earlier, we heard about the implications of ICE and immigration. You know, something as public charge still looms for a lot of our patients. So those things we have to constantly keep in mind. And again, using an empathic approach really helps to build rapport and trust with our patients, and may be able to not overcome some of those things that are external and out of our control, but at least mitigate that so that we're able to connect with patients and let them know that you're here with us. We always want to make sure that we're facilitating trainings that focus on the intersectionality of folks, because we all have different identities and roles, and we all should be approached as individualistically as possible. And then the final point here is that, you know, there's deep roots within social drivers of health, and it's really rare when we talk about that. So really understanding and really thinking about how do we train our staff and ourselves on racial trauma, implicit bias, redlining, and the impacts of slavery and colonization. Again, those things that are external and we don't really have control over that, but there are ways that we can at least have some of that come in mind. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go back to Menti, one last Menti for all of us here. So just going to go back there real quickly. Here's the information again. So if needed, you'll have to go and refresh your browser. So here we want to know what are some strategies that you have utilized to conduct PRAPARE screening with special and vulnerable populations. Would love to hear some answers. If there's anything different, anything that, you know, maybe you want to share with others. We know you all are doing this work, so we want to be able to, you know, gather all the great insights from all of you and share with amongst each other. So if there's anything that you've all done, we'd love to hear that. It is okay. Practicing cultural humility, not assuming anything. And yes, it is very hard to do, very difficult. So thank you for sharing that. Having community health workers, that's a very wonderful strategy to have. Any other strategies? Phone calls. Yes, there is a lost art to phone calls, and sometimes it could be really powerful and just helpful in terms of working with patients, especially with patients that maybe have issues getting to the practice, the health center, or they might feel more safe to have a phone call. That's something that we can do. Having a language line is really helpful as well. Thank you for sharing that. All right, I'm looking at time, so I just want to make sure that we have enough time for the rest of our slides. We don't have too many more slides, so just hang tight with us. Listen if you don't understand a cultural aspect, ask the patient questions and let them teach you. Absolutely. And something that I forgot to mention too in terms of body language and eye contact, there's always cultural differences. So always, you know, ask the patients what is most comfortable for them. So definitely, you know, thank you for that reminder and asking them about priorities and preferences. Great. All right, so our next Menti is what challenges do you encounter when using PRAPARE with special and vulnerable populations? And it's okay if they're the same as before, but we'd love to hear from you all if there's anything that you want to share with all of us here. I'll give you all about like 20 seconds to answer here. I know we're coming down on time. I want to be very mindful of your precious time. So if there's about 5-10 more seconds. Yep, language is a big one. And sometimes it's like there's language differences, there's words differences, there's so much, right? So language is a really big barrier. They feel that I'm part of the they system and that I can't possibly care. Wow. That's a powerful reflection. So thank you for sharing that. Time constraints, that's very challenging. Yep, expectations around time and timeliness, not knowing their language, dialect, and cultural preference, hesitancy to answer. Patient might be too proud to accept help. Absolutely. And these are all valid and these are all okay. Oh, that's a big one, not being reimbursed for screening. Absolutely. All the things you have to do the screening and you're not going to get reimbursed. That's a huge challenge. Defensive in answering the questions due to fear what might happen based on the answers given. Those with mental illness, there can be some paranoia around why the questions are being asked. Absolutely. So these are really great things to consider. And again, we'll always have to navigate these challenges. So definitely we'll have to think about how would we navigate this. We don't have time to really explore that right now, but really thinking about how would we navigate working with those with severe mental illness. I've done that in the past, and you're right. It's something, you know, something that may seem as benign or tiny or whatever is really could be a really big trigger for someone with a mental illness, but or it could be something that could be really concern for others. So Thank you for sharing those responses. I really appreciate you all for sharing. At this point, I will go ahead and hand things over back to Chloe.
Thank you, Eureka. So as Eureka was stating earlier, I will be going over where some of these considerations are from. So many of these considerations are drawn from this publication created by NAC and APSHO. And so it will be available to you all. There are lots of information here that can be applicable to those conducting screenings and those providing training and technical assistance around social risk screenings. And as we've been stating in the chat as well, this presentation will be available to you all, so you feel free to click in there. So now this one, the PRAPARE example, the publication is divided into different sections, including 8 PRAPAREs, where the reader can select which population of focus they would like to learn more about. For instance, if you're a health center serving migrant and seasonal agricultural workers, you can find TTA providers that are experts, resources, and specific screening considerations, such as how to build cultural safety, understanding how the demographics of migrant workers has changed over time, and how having a dedicated provider for migrant workers can help build that trust that we spoke about earlier. As well as while each PRAPARE is interconnected and built on one another, each PRAPARE can be standalone resource for for TTA providers and those serving a special and vulnerable population type. For example, individuals or families experiencing homelessness, LGBTQ+ people, as well as migratory and seasonal agricultural workers, older adults, people experiencing intimate partner violence, residents of public housing, and school-age children. And the next one, this power of language and words. When we think about language and the use of words, its impact can be plotted on a continuum. On one end of the continuum, there is hate speech, which we have seen result in hate crimes on the Black, Latinx, Asian, and Indigenous communities, and those that identify out as LGBTQIA+. This language is overtly harmful and racist. In the middle of the continuum, we have words or terms that at first glance seem harmless, when in fact these terms are microaggressions and are subtle in nature. These terms are still harmful in that they perpetuate bias. On the other hand, on the continuum, we have language and words that are affirming and acknowledges the nuances in our diverse communities. In the fall of last year, the APSHO and NAC team started the process to develop this resource guided to help all of us use more inclusive and person-centric language. We realize that each of us as health professionals need to step back, be more intentional and thoughtful in our word choice. While it is not our intention, some of the words we use can have a negative impact when engaging with patients and compromise our relationships with them. This guide is a conversation starter and will be a living document. A copy of the guide is available as a handout, so please download it and share it with your colleagues. We hope this is helpful tool to you all in providing you and your teams to more person-centered language. Next slide, please. So now we're bringing it all together. Addressing the social needs of special populations will require all of us to test, fine-tune, and get feedback as we assess and address SDOH-related needs of patients. So empathic inquiry and patient-centered screening and conversation strategies allow for meaningful connection. HRSA has several defined special populations. However, health centers engage with broader set of patients, and screening for SDOH-related needs requires different techniques and flexibility for special populations. So now we would like to open up the floor for a question or two. We are, in the interest of time, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we will look to actually answer those as we follow up. So now, if you all have any questions, I think we've been answering them as the session's been going. Okay, so yeah, please feel free to drop them in the chat. And now we want to discuss our PRAPARE. Our next session is going to be April 3rd, and it's going to be linking data to PRAPARE. We will aim to understand how data standards and structure relate to the day-to-day of community health center staff. It is going to start at 2 p.m. And then we will be hearing from Ray, who is in our clinical affairs division, who will help us bring all of that together. And if you actually scan the QR code, it will take you directly to the registration link. Please feel free to do that. And with that, we want to thank you all for joining us today and actually sticking by. I know we're a bit over by 2 minutes, but thank you all for staying on the line, and have a great day. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email us at prapare@nac.org.
Hi, everyone. One last thing. We do have stories from the field on our website, but we're always looking for more. So please reach out to our team. We will work with you all on making sure that we're able to capture your story and elevate it. We know there's a lot of interest in health centers and all the work that you're all doing. So just want to make sure that you take some time to read the stories that are on the website, but also let us know of your story. We want to make sure that we're elevating the great work that you're doing. So again, thank you for joining us today. We know you all stuck over time. Actually, I'm seeing some questions in the chat. Yes, we'll be able to send out the registration link. That'll be sent in the follow-up email. Oh, thanks, Nalani. You're always on, always having everything on deck. And Ashley added, it's really important to listen to the affected communities, especially regarding person-centered language. Not all communities want to be referred to as a person with a disability. Yep, the autistic community has specifically said they don't want to be referred to as people with autism. Thank you for that feedback. And we actually, one of our team members actually gave us that guidance. So we have been updating our person-centered guide to person-centered language. We'll be sharing that soon. So thank you for sharing that, Ashley. So again, thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next month.